We have done quite a lot, but we need to ramp up. We just need to do more.
It hasn't made a difference yet, I suppose.
Faster and also more strategically.
Donald Trump has appeared to U-turn on his view that Ukraine can reclaim all of its territory from Russia, saying he doesn't think they'll win the war. It comes after reports that suggested the US president's meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House descended into a shouting match behind closed doors. Here's Trump speaking earlier about the prospect of peace in Ukraine.
I've settled 8 wars in 8 months. Not bad. I have 1 more to go. It's Russia-Ukraine, and I think we'll get there, but it's turned out to be nasty because you have 2 leaders that truly hate each other. They hate each other beyond all else, and it makes it actually a little bit difficult.
He was then asked by a reporter if he still believed Ukraine could take back its territory from Russia.
Well, they could. They could still win it. I don't think they will, but they could still win it. I never said they would win it. I said they could win. Anything can happen. War is a very strange thing.
Donald Trump there. It was also reported that Volodymyr Zelensky has rung around European leaders for support. So how might Europe respond next? Ville Niinistö is a Finnish MEP and chair of the European Parliament's delegation on Russia. Good evening, Ville. Really good to have you with us.
Good evening.
I wonder if Europe needs to demonstrate a show of strength, something significant, something more than the usual amount of support that European nations have been offering Volodymyr Zelensky.
Well, I think this week will be crucial. There's the EU Leaders Summit on Thursday, and there will be most likely a decision on the reparation loan, so 140 billion euros to support Ukraine of the frozen assets of Russia. So that's one signal. And then there's also on Friday, Zelensky will visit also in the UK and have talks with the coalition of the willing. So I think there is a need for show of European unanimity in support to Ukraine, so that there is no coerced peace and any peace that Trump is pushing for, because that means that the risk of Putin's aggression will continue.
What do you think of Donald Trump's about turn on this? We've gone from one to the other and back to the original one now. Apparently during the meeting, and we're just starting to get reports of the meeting at the White House, full details starting to emerge. Apparently Trump tossed aside maps of the front line, urged Kyiv to concede its entire Donbass region to Russia to clinch a deal. And apparently Trump said, Putin will destroy you if you don't agree now. This is someone familiar with the meeting. Zelensky had his maps and everything, and he was explaining it to him, but Trump wanted nothing to do with it. Trump listened but was not responsive to the Ukrainian message. What do you make of that?
I think the worrying signal is that whenever Trump has been talking to Putin or any Russian counterpart, he starts to echo their message. And that's really worrying, because the risk of any concessions to an aggressor and moving also the Euro borders in Europe means that Russia gets what it wants, and the threat of Russia will just increase. So we just have to be able as Europeans to convince and show to President Trump that he would also lose in any such peace that will make the Russian aggression to even, just escalate. So it's not just about, Russia will not be satisfied with only Donbass. They still want to limit the sovereignty of Ukraine. And, the talk of security guarantees and all of those preconditions for a long-term sustainable peace, Trump doesn't even mention them.
Is it sort of time to bring in Europe's favourite Trump whisperers? And by these people, I mean the Finnish president, someone you know well, Alexander Stubb, and our Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who seem to have had quite a bit of luck when it comes to getting through to Donald Trump. Do they need to perhaps take a political risk and lean on Donald Trump, try and exert some influence on the US president?
I think those leaders are one of the few leaders that Trump actually listens to in Europe, that he seems to like. And Trump very much has a personal relationship focus in his foreign policy. So President Stubb and Keir Starmer should do their utmost to show to Trump that, any concession to Russia would mean that also the American influence would diminish, that Russia's threat is actually prolonged and not stopped. And therefore, I think it's important that we go back to the discussion on whether the US would actually give Tomahawks to Ukraine, that Ukraine has long-range capabilities to hurt Russia's infrastructure, especially energy infrastructure within Russia. That could force Russia into an honest negotiating table, also with more sanctions on Russian economy, which is actually currently doing quite bad.
Yeah, I mean, it feels so far away from the discussions about Tomahawks missiles and whether the US would provide them, whether they'd have enough to make a difference. It feels like we're further away than ever from that.
That's correct.
He was interviewed on Air Force One on Sunday. Donald Trump asked if he urged Zelensky to give up Donbass. He said later he hadn't. Let's cut it the way it is, leave it the way it is now, he told reporters. Which, I mean, part of the way that he's talking about this, I don't know if you agree, Ville, he seems quite sort of casual about this. Some of the phraseology, cut it the way it is, leave it as it is. It sort of almost feels too casual.
Yeah, I think there is very little understanding of the consequences for international law and the international rules-based order if we would do as he proposes, because Ukraine has been ready. Let's face it, Ukraine has been ready to have a ceasefire straight away. But what Trump means that there would be concessions, that there would be permanent ceding of land, and that would mean that that an aggressor state can force borders to be moved in Europe. That would be a threat to all of us in Europe.
Yeah. Where should Ukraine be on territory? I think we all need to be realistic about this, and perhaps we need to understand and remind ourselves that some of the things Donald Trump says, a bit like Ukraine taking all of its territory back, might just be, as we've seen with some of these attitudes towards the current front lines, just taken with a pinch of salt. The idea and some of the different suggestions made here is that Ukraine will have to concede some land to Russia if it's a US brokered settlement. Russian forces, of course, to remind our listeners, have taken much of the Donbass, but they've tried and failed to seize the entirety of Donetsk, that region. It's in eastern Ukraine. Been over a decade of fighting there. Putin suggested to Trump that he would give up claims to parts of two other Ukrainian regions that Russia has not entirely conquered. That's the Zaporizhia and the Kherson region, in exchange for full control of Donetsk. I mean, is any of that palatable? I know in an ideal world not. But I mean, if we want to stop the bloodshed, if we want to give Ukraine a chance to get on with life and start to rebuild, do we have to be realistic about territory?
We don't even know in detail whether Putin has offered to give Ukraine back land that they have taken in Kherson or Zaporizhia, or does he mean land that they have written in Russian law that is theirs, even if they don't control it currently, because part of Zaporizhia and Kherson is still in Ukrainian hands. But we have to still remember the facts here. So Russia is the invader. So I think we have to understand also that obviously it's very difficult to push a conqueror away for Ukraine. So first step for any long-lasting peace is first to have a ceasefire, to create demilitarized zones, and then to create a pathway to a solution where Ukraine can have security guarantees that Russia can not attack again. And then there should be also a future for Ukraine in European Union and NATO. And only after that, I think Ukraine could be willing to have a discussion about land. And it should not be a discussion where somebody coerces them like Mr. Trump does currently. That's totally wrong, that he's playing into the hands of Putin and Russia.
But look, sadly,
that's a big risk.
Sadly, it is similar to what's happening between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Donald Trump appears to be the only person on the world stage who can broker any sort of ceasefire deal. Mm-hmm. I mean, is that then a damning indictment of European leaders, that once again we're relying on an unpredictable US president to get the job done? Does this expose the fragility, the lack of power of European leaders?
Well, I think still the common military and especially the economic strength of Europe, UK included, is strong enough for us to show that Ukraine cannot be forced and coerced to a peace that doesn't give them long-term sovereignty.
But we haven't done so far, have we? And so people listening to this are going to say, well, Europe's not managed to do anything. What do we need European leaders to do?
Well, if you count the money and the weapons, we've given about half of the weapons to Ukraine. So US have given half of the money support. We have given majority. So we have done quite a lot, but we need to ramp up. We just need to do
it hasn't
more,
made a difference yet, I suppose.
Faster and also more strategically. And that is the big question, that many European leaders have chosen to support Ukraine enough for them not to lose. But nobody is thinking about what we should do in order to make sure that they can actually stop the conqueror.
Volodymyr Zelensky has also said he'd be ready to join Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin at a proposed summit in Hungary if he were invited. Is that a good idea, Ville?
Well, obviously, we should also be critical about a war criminal coming to European soil. He should be then given to the International Criminal Court to answer for his crimes, Putin, obviously. So that's already a concession if European leaders allow him to fly to Hungary. And I think if Orban is hosting a summit where Putin and Trump are, it will be very difficult for Zelensky to be able to get any reasonable, respectable welcome there.
OK, well, look, thank you for being with us. Ville Niinistö, who is a Finnish MEP and Chair of the European Parliament's delegation on Russia. Thank you so much for being with us.